Hello, everyone. Welcome to Tea with TPS, informal conversations with thought leaders in India and abroad. Today, our distinguished guest is Mr. Gopikrishnan Kottoor, one of the most prolific, recognized, published, and awarded both nationally and internationally. He is not only a poet, but also a playwright and a novelist. He has won many awards. He has published 17 anthologies of poetry, and he has 2 plays. He has a novel, and also, most recently, Changambure's Ramanan translated into English. Welcome, Gopi Kottoor.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Well, I'd like to take you through to your poetic journey today. And my first question is, why a pen name and how did you assume it? Because I did not know that Gopi Kottoor was a pen name and not your real name. What made you do that?
Actually, my name is R. Gopikrishnan Nair.
Not Raghavan Nair. According to Google, it is Raghavan Nair.
Yes, Raghav is the full form of R. R. Gopikrishnan Nair.
Okay.
Yeah. And actually, Kottoor is my ancestral home.
Yes,
So,
in my college, I had a couple of Kottoors and I was thinking that you might be related to them.
Kottoor, our family is in Irevipuram.
Okay.
It's in Kollam. And some of our distinguished people along the line are Kottoor Kunju Vishnapilla, who was a judge. And there was this person, Gopi Kottoor, who went to the pre-Olympics. So,
But there is a Trivandrum Kottoor.
there is one who was a Michael Jackson's secretary, his daughter, I think.
In other words, it is not a pen name. It is just your name, but written differently on different occasions.
Yes, later point of time, I thought I will write under the name Gopi Kottoor.
All right. So it's not a pen name as such, but your name.
Not exactly a pen name, but
what I thought was that since you moved from banking to poetry, you thought you needed a more poetic name. That's what I thought. That's not true.
No. Long back, I was writing under Gopi Kottoor.
Okay, that's very good. That clears the air on that. You are a product of the Institute of English in Trivandrum, which is famous for very many creative people. Is that where you started your writing, or were you writing even before you went to the Institute of English?
Actually, I started writing sometime after I finished my school. Though there are people in some of my relations who claim that I used to write even when I was a child, but I don't remember. So, but as far as I know, I started writing when I just finished my higher secondary and was about to join my BA.
So when were you first published?
I was published when I just got into college. I was published. I was published by Shivke Kumar in the Illustrated Weekly, and Bennett and Coleman was running Youth Times, in which we used to appear for a while. I think Mr. Jayakumar also used to appear there.
And tell us your experience of the Institute of English. Dr. Ayyappa Panikkar was there. There were other luminaries. Dr. Ayyappa Panikkar was there. There were other luminaries at the Institute. So what are your impressions and how did it shape you as a creative writer?
Actually, I got published for a while when I was in the college itself, BA. That was before I joined the Institute of English. And I was pursuing this poetry even when I got into the Institute of English. By the time I had published a few things, and Dr. Panikkar was aware that I had published also. And before Dr. Panikkar's the influence, I was influenced by the professor in Mario in his college, Nabilan, T.K. Doraiswamy.
Right.
He is the cardinal influence for my poetry. And before that, my father, yes. My father was the first person who collected my juvenile things and printed them. And he took me to Professor Doreswamy. And long before I even dreamt of these creative writing classes, etc., my Sundays used to be a workshop in Dr. T.K. Doreswamy's house.
I see.
He shaped my poetry because he opened big doors of poetry for me, world doors of poetry. I mean,
Yes,
I was influenced.
He was my colleague in Marianis College. Most unassuming. He used to ride a cycle and come to the college.
Yes, till it's almost his last years.
Nobody knew he was a genius. We had only heard about
He
him.
was.
One couldn't make out.
Leave that impression.
Yes, so interesting personality. But Dr. Ayyappa Panikkar, of course, was more famous in Malayalam poetry than in English at that time, wasn't he?
Actually, Dr. Panikkar, even though he was a Malayalam poet, in the Institute of English and the world over, he was regarded as a great enthusiast of English poetry.
True.
So I think one of the first books of contemporary anthologies of poetry was edited by Dr. Panikkar, which was done by Sahitya Academy.
Mm-hmm.
And it was during Panikkar's time that Dr. Panikkar, he had a special interest in me because I used to write, and whenever poets came like Amna Das, K.K. Darwala, R. Parthasarathi, he used to call me and he used to take me with him. And he started the poetry we started a poetry group in which we used to meet, myself, a few poets from the University College, and we used to hold readings. And Dr. Panikkar's influence was tremendous, in fact. And then it lasted after a while when I started the poetry chain. He came into it. And in fact, he was a mentor till around 2007. Till almost he passed away.
No, but Dr. Panikkar is known as the person who introduced new poetry into Malayalam. But has he made any such contribution to English?
Essays in which Dr. Panikkar did not want to be known as an English poet. Though he promoted, though he wanted to, he did not wish to be regarded as an Indo-English poet at all. He wanted to be a Malayalam poet first and last. And that way, I think even most of his translations are also by himself. He has translated his own poetry. But unlike people like K. Sachidanandan, who perhaps would not mind entering into English poetry with his own translations, I think Dr. Panikkar drew a line, and he felt that he wasn't going to be an English poet at all. Though I think he would have been a great English poet by any standards. There's no doubt about that.
Right. I was looking at some of your writings to figure out what could be your philosophy in your poetry. So I found this sentence: soul is one's alma mater. He who finds and befriends his soul in this life makes himself and his poetry. Something similar. Stressing the importance of the soul and finding it and befriending it. So is that what your philosophy is? And have you succeeded in finding your soul?
Yes, basically that is the philosophy, because I remember writing this. When one befriends one's soul, what happens is that one is very clear in his conscience. And that allows him to write not only poetry, it allows him to live a life of poetry, that's important.
I called it living poetry, this anecdote.
Yes. In fact, the whole world becomes a the ocean in which the poet becomes the fish. You know, he is always breathing poetry, you know, in a liquid form. And wherever you look and wherever, I think that is what I meant by saying that, you know, you should befriend your soul. It's that you should go into yourself to understand the outside world. That I think has been a kind of philosophy for me. Or, you know, but the philosophy is always evolving. It is not static. There cannot be a static philosophy. The more you experience life, the more your philosophy grows. So, befriending is very much a big part of that philosophy of poetry.
And that you can
By
see in all your writings. This is reflected in all your writing.
I like to think so. I like to think that my poetry is basically a kind of poetry in which I have not tried to imitate the trends that go on at the moment, because there are a lot of trends, you know, you can try to imitate. And if you look at many publishing houses, they say, okay, you follow us and see the kind of poetry we try to publish. But following something and trying to get published in the way somebody else wants to get you published is not the way you have to publish. You have to publish when you have to be your own. On your own, you have to understand yourself again, and you have to write your poetry. You cannot write somebody else's poetry.
No, but to
You
get
have to write your own
recognized,
poetry.
to get recognized, you have to be published by somebody else. So you are not
Yes,
entirely your own person.
yes, but to get recognized, you don't have to write somebody else's poetry.
No, that's not what
You
I
have to
mean.
get
You need recognition. You have to fit into a pattern that the publisher accepts.
Yes, there are difficulties on that count. There are difficulties on. So, you know, what happens is, you know, now for that matter, you know, the social media dissolves many of that problems. You know, earlier it was difficult, you know, to get your poems published when you're writing in your own way. But for that matter, it was very easy for me to get published in the earlier days. In that, so and while making a kind of small presence, I can say, I was only building on myself, and that to make others accept the way you write is difficult. But if that happens, that is something.
No,
See,
but has the
publishers
social
want
media,
you to write
has
in
the growth
some
of the
frame.
social media, the growth of the social media, has it helped poetry in general? There are many people who are able to publish, or has it created a chaos because there is no choice, selection is not made, and too many
No,
of these poems come in?
There are 2-3 ways of looking at it, because if you look at one way, the traditional publishing houses are failing. They are no more publishing any poetry, except one or two. Then you will find that most of these print magazines are closed. Everything is online. Every person who claims to be a poet now has got his own online magazine. It is not, it is free. You just put a blogspot and you make your magazine. So any day you find a mushroom growth of magazines, and everybody is an editor of poet. Every poet is an editor. So,
but what is the impact of it? Has it
yeah,
affected the general quality of poetry?
that again is see, suppose you write a poem, you get 100 likes. Suppose you write a poem, you get no like. But basically, I think it is the poet himself who must understand the quality of the poems he writes. It is not, see, that the social media recognizes you, because there are thousands of groups. There are thousands of Facebook groups. There are thousands of social media groups. They all allow you to flow. They all allow the poetic waters to flow. So every budding poet is now or likes to think by publishing in the social media that he is a poet. But you know, there is, after everything, there is a standard. And I think you will be tested only by that yardstick. poetry, just because everybody writes poetry or just because everybody is able to publish in social media does not mean that he or she becomes a poet. All that will be there, but to finally, the worth of the poet will be decided by the poem you write. So
Right.
I think that's very important.
But when you write poetry, you first try to publish it in a recognized publication, don't you? Or you put your own anthology or put it on online. Would you give first priority
No,
to your work
that's a
to be
simultaneous
published?
process. Earlier when we used to write, we used to go after the magazines. But now I think I write and then I put on Facebook nowadays. I don't go through the laborious way of writing to print magazines, for example. But I do write to online magazines and get published. Yes.
But when you
So
get all these, when you get all these awards, do they come even through social media, or it has to be published?
no. None of these awards come through social media. They are not in the context of social media, though
That's what I'm
many
saying.
of
So
these.
there is a difference. There's a difference in what you write on social media and what you publish. So you get these awards on the basis of the fact that somebody has published you and it has come to their notice.
It is not like that. See, when you write a poem or you write some piece that you think is worthy of sending across to a competition, you do that. Not all the poems that you write, you will send across to competitions. You
No,
write
that's
a
what I
poem.
mean. So there are two kinds of poetry you might write. One meant for publication, a recognized magazine or publication, and the other for the social media. Is that how it comes?
No, it is not for the social media that you write. It is for the private self that you write.
Okay.
It is for the self that you write. It is not for the social media can see it. I think there's a difference between writing for the social media and writing for the self.
Okay.
Because
Understood.
most of the poems, some of the poems you write for the self, you might even hide them. You may not publish them like that. But some poems which you feel others should also read, and they will also be interested or they will be absorbed by it, then you put them in the media. So the media works in many directions, and the best of them you think, okay, I think this is a good poem which should not be just left in the social media. I must send it to a magazine, or I must send it to a competition, and then I take it out and do it. So there are many layers on this.
All right. All right. How does this group you founded, Poetry Chain, how do these group help writers? Is it because they are able to come and read and take opinions from the others, and then they are able to shape their style according to the responses? How does it help writers?
The Poetry Chain basically was started some 10, 15 years, 20 years back. And at that time, the idea was to give a voice to the emerging voices with particular emphasis in Kerala. So a lot of Kerala poets. So we used to have meetings, and when I got the national prizes of the All India British Council, I was toying with the idea of this Poetry Chain. And when I did that, I used to do it in photostat mode, and we used to have small sets of poets gathering around us, all Trivandrum based. And then we used to get poetry from all over the place, from Kerala, India. So it became a pan-Indian affair over time. And it was at that period that Dr. Panikkar also got involved with us, and he used to attend every meeting. We used to conduct workshops, and many of the poets who are writing now in mainstream magazines or who have made a mark, their first appearances have been in Poetry Chain. Many of them are and it is not out of place to mention that the influence of Mr. K. Jayakumar, who at that point of time when I was toying with the idea of poetry chain, he was also very much influential in helping me to put this on as a permanent platform, like giving it a kind of printing facility. So in fact, that's very fortunate, in fact, because he called me one day to his room, and then he told me that he had a friend who was running a press, and he wanted me to talk to him. And it happened that the friend he had was our neighbor, and my mother used to help that boy who was always coming to help my mother. So, and he had become a master of the printing process. And so he told me that, anytime you want to publish or print, my press is free for you. So that was a big leap for Poetry Chain. So that way we were able to come into a pan-Indian culture. Like most of the Indian poets who are writing now have been published in Poetry Chain. And locally, even now we conduct workshops. And workshops, not only workshops, we do WhatsApp groups, poetry groups. In fact, most of the KIC forum people are also there. And in fact, it helps in many ways. Many of the poets have been ground sort of by our reviews, our statements, etc. That has helped kind of amelioration of their poetry.
So you can claim that you can claim
poetry
that
workshops,
you have
and I was fortunate to have a orientation program in Texas University also on creative writing. So I was able to bring all that, and it works well. And even today, people come to attend our meetings, and it goes well. Such workshops are very important.
You can claim that the Poetry Chain has encouraged a number of young poets, that you can say, right? And that is the purpose.
Not only young poets, many poets who were about 30, 40 years old and who would perhaps were not recognized, and young as far as writing is concerned, we were able to publish their first poems. And we brought out anthologies. We gave awards to school-going poets. We gave certificates. So many people have been gained from our Poetry Chain certificates. So that kind of work, not just poetry workshop.
Okay.
Poetry Chain has done that kind of work.
Coming to your own writings, you have won several awards. Which one do you value most? Is that the German award which gave you time in Germany to work for some time? The one that Father wake us in passing, which is supposedly I haven't read it, but very poignant poem about your father. Is that it? Do you
Actually,
consider
there are many facets to it. Actually, see, the kind of recognition you get when you get the topmost award in a national level, like the All India Poetry Competitions, which was conducted by eminent poets who came in from Britain and all that. And I happen to be lucky to have got all their awards, and fortunate, in fact. And those, in fact, help you to shape your creative process, and to help you determine yourself in a poetic world where there is a lot of competition, where there is a lot of rejection, where there is a lot of jealousies, there is a lot of pulling down, all that kind of thing. When you get some prizes, etc., which are blind awards, blind things, that has more value than, say, a award given by a committee or something like that, because your poems are chosen on the basis of what is supposed to be a merit. It is not the person who is known, it is the poetry that is known. So that way, I think many of the awards came as a boon to me, and an encouragement to me. But my father vacation passing poem was in fact a poignant poem which was written during my father's final days of coma, and it won recognition after it was written. It won the it won the Augsburg residency and all that.
You went to Augsburg University in Germany.
Yes, and they read the poem and translated the poem and published the poem. All those things happened, but that award, that recognition is, I think, an after effect of the poetry, and I value that recognition very much. It is one poem which has been regarded, thankfully, and but all the awards I think that I've received, I go through the poems which won the awards, and I find that there must be reasons why they have chosen them. So I like to think that they are all my luck and
best works. Now you are very prolific. You seem to write a poem almost every day. And and do you enter these competitions even now?
Yes, I enter because I've always felt that a part of the money I get should be utilized for poetry. So there are many ways to utilize them, and one of them is entering competitions. And often sometimes I'm lucky to get awards.
So you do get rewarded in several ways, not only awards, but other rewards too.
Yeah.
Okay, coming to your dramatic works, The Fire in the Soul. Why poet Bharati?
Pardon ji? Fire in the Soul.
Poet Bharati was chosen as the topic for this play.
Subramanya Bharati was chosen as the topic of the play. There are 2-3 reasons for it. One is I was in Chennai at that point of time, and I happened to pass through the Chennai main road to my reserve bank, and I used to see the statue of Bharatiyar every day, and I used to read articles on him, and after some point of time he seemed to kind of in most of my work, most of my work is related to real life people, because I have done Subramanya Bharati, I have done the last days of John Keats, then I have done this Devasahayam, then I have done a book on Anand John, then I did a book on the dancers. All these are drawn from real life, and the most important and the most vibrant aspect of such writing is that you are able to enter the character. For a time you feel you are so much into the character that you do not have an identity of yourself, because you merge with the character. And that's very, very important, in my life. Like people doing film roles, you enter the character and then you become the character. You become Bharati, you become Devasahayam symbolically. You cannot be them. You cannot be them normally and literally,
and Keats and
or
John
physically.
Keats.
Yeah, but you become them symbolically because you want to see what made them what they are. So you want to enter their mind, and you want to enter each moment of their lives. So that is how I think that imaginative writing is different from writing imaginatively about people who lived,
Which
because
means
you enter their lives.
A lot of research has to be done because you don't know them.
Yes, and that is very important, and that is very adventurous, and that is very exciting, because when I did Bharati, I went to Ettayapuram, I went to the temple where he was. I saw all the people, most of the people who were associated with him, and then I was able to. I even went to the palace. I went to all that kind of thing happens, because otherwise you cannot write. Otherwise you cannot sit in an
you run the
ivory
risk
tower
of
and write.
You run the risk of being told that you have either misrepresented the person or you have not found his soul. That can also happen, isn't it, when you do this? If you have pure fiction, you won't have that problem.
No, in pure fiction, not. But you are open to that kind of criticism. But basically, as I said earlier, it is a kind of finding yourself, finding your soul, what you think is true, how it would have been, how it could have been at that moment of life. That is how you enter a person, and you enter the character. It is only then that you can write lines that is not fictional, that is true, and that is not creative. So, for example, in The Mask of Death, which I wrote on the last days of John Keats, I was drawing from his letters. Most of the love letters of John Keats, they form a character in the subconsciously. They form the character in the drama. So, and I chose drama as my medium, even though I know that it has no audience, because I will be able to fulfill myself only in a drama. I will not be able to fulfill myself equally well in a novel, or even in that kind of fiction which is not true. Of course, all fiction will have some element of truth in it, and the novel is built on them. But when you go on a character in life, you have so many nuances of the character, too, so many mysteries the character will present that you must solve. For example, Bharati's life, there are many mysteries which you have to solve for the character. In Devasahayam's life also, there are many mysteries that you have to put forth a suggestion, or okay, this could have been what was. And if others think that is in the normal flow of things, I think to some point you have succeeded. But there is always an element of, the people would say that, okay, he has not represented this well. This happens. But that could be there. But again, you take shelter saying that this is only a fictional or imaginary work based on a true person.
Well, Gopi, as it happens, the day we are going to premiere this conversation also happens to be the day on which Devasahayam Pillai is being canonized in Rome. Did you?
He is canonized on June 15th.
June 15th, not May 15th.
Sorry, May 15th.
Yeah, that is the day we are going to broadcast your program.
Oh, yeah, I didn't occur to me.
So,
yes.
So, were you expecting him to be canonized when you wrote this play?
He was beatified, and there were stories around that people are trying to canonize him, but there was no idea, as to when it would happen. Because so many things can, and under the person's circumstances, everything was very fluid, and there was no real indication that he would even be canonized. Because there were efforts, so many efforts have been, so much was being done for the canonization, but there were elements that could have stood in the way. There were so many things, but luckily it happened. That's
so
good.
You can take credit in contributing to his canonization by writing this play.
I am nowhere near all those. But
okay, coming to that particular theme, wasn't there some kind of a dilemma for you between these two characters, Devasahayam Pillai on the one hand and Martandavarma on the other? You have tried to balance them very well. You are not shown anyone as a villain or a hero. And as I wrote in my review, it was an immaculate conversion. There was no kind of, what shall we say, any apprehension about it being misunderstood as a conflict between the Maharaja and him. And that is what you have tried to do. But in actual fact, wasn't he rebelling against his own Maharaja and his own society? And of course, your faith can perhaps be, faith can overcome these things. But how do you judge that? Was he right in doing this, that is breaking away from someone who had protected him, who had brought him up, and then he just, defies him and goes into a life which is not acceptable to the Maharaja, not personally, but officially he could not accept it.
See, there comes a time in everyone's life when one must be allowed to choose one's way. So, as far as Devasahayam was concerned, he was loyal, and he was loyal to the very end. And nothing on record shows that he did anything to even show an iota of rebellion. No, there was no such thing. But what is more important is that he was only trying to find out what he was trying to do for himself. Like on the one hand, he was a person who was very sensitive, very tender-hearted, and at that point of time, it wasn't easy for a person, a soldier man like him, who was a little respectable in society, who worked for the king, to go and meander or to go and be part of the untouchable group. But he used to do it. So what comes across is humanity. See, if you look at that society of Marthandavarma's kingdom, at that point of time, only the untouchables were allowed to be Christians. The higher castes were not allowed to be Christians. So there was a lot of taboo. It was a time when, all kinds of religious practices and superstitions were much, very, very common. It was a time of slavery. And as I was saying, it was a time, the cheapest slaves were those that could be got from Kerala.
And the Dutch took them away?
Yes, the Dutch took them. The Dutch used to take them because they were cheaper than the other slaves.
But this is even after the Dutch lost the war.
No. It's not after the Dutch lost the war. It is about time when the Dutch still had access to the place, and before the collateral war.
But then Delanoy became the Valiya Kapitan after the war. And
yes.
He was also serving the Maharaja. But then
yes.
Why did he influence Devasahayam Pillai to become a Christian? So was he playing two masters?
It was not that Delanoy influenced, as far as I can see. Delanoy did not influence him to become a Christian. Delanoy only said that Christ is an answer to your problems. He said that because Delanoy was a true Christian, and nothing could shake his faith in Jesus Christ. So it's only natural that a person, you come to where everything is red or blue, and you are white, you only become red and blue along with you lose your white color. So the faith that Delanoy showed in his God and the human approach to God, this God who could be accessible to everybody, unlike the Hindu gods, many of them. At that point of time, we all know there were two parts, three parts, one for the Brahmin, one for all this is now, we know these things. Everywhere there was only inequality. Everything there was, as I was telling today in another interview, fortunately, what kinds of taxes were there at that point of time? If an untouchable died, the death could be taxed. If a girl became mature, she could be taxed for for attaining puberty. If somebody died of smallpox, the whole hut could be burned with all the people in it. And there is one instance in point I've shown. There was even a saying that this girl is not even good or fit to be a spirit for the wall or the dike. We were living in such odd times. The Hindu, so it was at this point of time that something fresh like Christianity came there, which showed compassion, which showed equality, which was trying to preach a new wave of life, to which this man was drawn. You cannot blame him for having been drawn to that.
But Gopi, Illinois, his faith did not conflict with his serving the Maharaja because he was not a convert. Is that the reason? Because he was able to continue as the captain.
No, in fact, Marthandavarma allowed religious practices like that. Even before that, Duane Scott, Donati, they all followed their own religions.
No, then why not
There was
Devasahayam?
that kind of
Why couldn't
the only thing.
Devasahayam do that? Why couldn't he do that? Why couldn't he be a Christian and also serve the Maharaja?
No, he was in fact trying to do just that, but there were so many staunch oppositions against him, which built up cases against him. Otherwise, if nobody had minded, he would have just gone like that. If nobody had cared for that, he would have done a little conversion or something, but there were prejudices in the mind that this person was doing such things, and that the Maharaja was not directly responsible. The Maharaja was mostly interested only in winning his wars. Most of the time, the secretarial work and the home work was done by his ministers. The most famous was Ramayan. So
Ramayan was totally against it. Ramayan was totally against it, right?
No, we cannot say totally against, but even he was perhaps made to be influenced by some of these orthodox teams that worked against Devasahayam. So we can see a kind of prejudice against it. Yeah, but one or two things that Devasahayam did wrong was that even after the king said that anything against Srivatmanabha or Travancore will be considered as tyranny. He will be treated as a rebel or tyrant. The only mistake that Devasahayam did was that he refused to go on exile.
Yes.
He did not go on it. He was told, let him go to the Katadi Hills, beyond the Katadi Hills, because that is a jurisdiction. Marthandavarma's jurisdiction is up. Vadakangulam doesn't come to him. So he was told, let him go away. But Devasahayam doesn't go. So, and then there is no record.
He invited martyrdom to himself.
He in fact came to that kind of a level in which he did that. We don't know why or how, but towards the end, his life's, because he was. There is one historical statement. I mean, there is a record statement in which Ramayan says that I will see to it that all these people come back to Hinduism, and then he says, "You must begin with me, because I am now a Christian." So there was an open confrontation. So for things to take that kind of a confrontation level, there had to be a kind of, influences that made that such things possible, that maybe took sides or something like that. But I'm sure that as far as my reading goes, the king, up to a point, only wished to forgive him. But if something like a conversion, etc., was leading to a position of chaos in the society, he wanted that the needful should be done as per law. And at that point of time, it was easy for the others to take a decision on him. Even today, I think there is no record to show that he was murdered or shot. There is no palace record.
Then how did he die?
Pardon, Ji?
And how did he die?
No, he was taken secretly to the Katadi Hills, where he was asked to go on imprisonment, and possibly to be killed.
But if he has
We don't
not
know.
killed, then he could not have been a martyr.
Yes, he was killed and he became a martyr. And
Yes.
he was killed in such a way that nobody would know that he died. He was taken to the Katadi hills and then he was thrown. He was shot and thrown. It was only a kind of coincidence that his body was found.
I see.
So, because some of the people, it seems, who are coming from Vadakangulam, they who were resting there saw his body, and his body was mutilated, shot at, and it was a very accidental thing, that his body. Otherwise, we would not have known that that was the intention, perhaps, not to
No,
make him
there
a
is-
martyr or something.
Now there is a sect or group or a church which recognizes him as their saint, right?
Yes.
The people who are now celebrating this canonization, etc.
Even
have accepted.
during the final days of Devasahayam, he was treated as a god. He was treated as an alter state of Christ. In some places, he is called Muttidicha Neshu. That is, he is called Christ, the Christ who got water from the rocks.
Right.
So the people have already given him that position of being a god. And even in the coastal parts of Kanyakumari and the Kolachal region, he is regarded as a god. I don't know about the truth of all those things, but we have such things happening.
But
But
for
a miracle or two
canonization,
is attributed to him.
for canonization, you have to prove some miracles having been performed. No?
Yes,
Because
two miracles, I think.
it takes many years for that to be established, and that's how it takes a long, long time. So, was there anything like that?
Yes, in the case of Devasahayam, the primary miracle was this bringing water from the rock.
He did.
Yes, the second one is recorded is that after he prayed, the executioner and got an offspring after several years. That boy himself records these statements. So I think these two miracles were accepted.
By
At
the
least the
Catholic.
first miracle is a lasting miracle, of which nobody doubts. I myself don't know about the miracle, but it's supposed to be there.
Right. Anyway, we are running out of time. Let's come to your latest translation of Ramanan into English. What is your purpose? Who did you intend to be your audience?
The audience is basically an audience that has no recourse to Malayalam, and or the kind of audience that has heard so much about Ramanan, of my generation also, and would have liked to read it in Malayalam but cannot because they are not exposed to Malayalam. And
No, but
also,
that's a great
thirdly,
necessity. I always say that if our Malayalam literature is not translated more extensively, it will not get any recognition in the world. That's why we have not got a Nobel Prize. Otherwise, Vaikam Muhammad Bashir could have got a Nobel Prize, or M.T. Vasudevan could still get a Nobel Prize. But all these works are not being translated and published abroad. Tagore, because Gitanjali was translated by himself and it became world famous, that's why he got the Nobel Prize.
and it was noticed by Yeats, yes, W.B. Yeats.
So that has to happen. And therefore, what you're doing is great. But what I'm saying is, a
Thank you.
Malayali like me who knows Ramanan, I won't be fascinated by reading an English translation.
No, but there is a world out there who likes to read and know, like yourself, you have been saying, sir. There is none of these great works of Bashir or M.T. Vasudevan, they have been translated. But there are people who would like to read them if they are translated across the world. Ramanan, for that matter, across the world, there are not only Malayalis, there may be English people, there may be so many people who are interested in knowing what this pastoral elegy is like.
That'll be very good if it happens.
Yes.
But my concern is that an English translation of a Malayalam poet may not be of great interest to Malayalis. If you think that there will be an audience for it, people may buy it because it's Ramanan, good to have a copy in English in your library. But beyond that, when you read it, you are immediately thinking that you're missing something. Why don't I read it in Malayalam? That is the feeling I had when I read it, even though your translation is impeccable. But that is the one that when you have the original, you do not really feel like reading it in another language. I don't know.
No, see, sir, there is a difference, because that is essentially why people shy away from this translation of work like Malayalam. See, you cannot translate a Madhusudanan Nair poem into English and get that kind of feeling because the diction it is rooted in and the music of the language is not there in English. Part of 75% of Ramanan is the music. And the 25% is his coining of words in such a way that music gets the kind of impact that lends itself to the work. Now, if you are translating it into English, for all that kind of matter, English is a flat language. Because, even when you listen to English songs, a person who listens to English songs and a person who has listened to Malayalam songs, a person who knows Malayalam, and basically because you are a Keralite, you cannot get that impact of Malayalam in the English songs. You like the lines, that's one thing. You like those lines, but
so if you do it
cannot
as
get
a
the
service to Malayalam literature, this is an excellent initiative. But for your own satisfaction, that others are going to read your English translation, that you may be disappointed. That's what I'm saying.
I was always ready for such a disappointment. But more important for me was the writing of it. Like I told you earlier, sir, entering the characters, entering Ramanan, entering Changambula's mind. All these are important to me. More than whether what would have been the mind of Changambula at that point of time is very important. And what would have been the way in which he wanted Ramanan and the Chandriya to react. All these things are very important. Those are the things that play a significant role in your translation. And then you try to base itself on in a manner in which you can link the foreign language as close as possible to the native language so that it doesn't lose in terms of description, narrative. You cannot bring that kind of music which is so foreign to English, and you cannot translate an English poem just like that into Malayalam also. How will it feel if you translate Shakespeare into Malayalam?
Yes,
You may not get that differences.
Sardar Panikkar has done that.
Yes, we are doing it, but the flow of the language and the richness of the diction, you may not get it in the other language. I think that's why we always say that translation you lose a lot, but you gain elsewhere.
Right. No, but this
Elsewhere
is
where
no, certainly it's creditable that you have done this because I always say that more and more Malayalam literature should come into English.
thank you.
Finally, what are your future plans? Are you going to write more poetry, prose, or plays?
Unless something like Devasahayam or something comes across, I may not be doing any drama, but I have in the long term plan for a novel which I have not started yet. But the poetry will remain. Poetry will be there always as a part of me. So I don't think I can free myself from it. That's the problem. So at least not as on today. I cannot. It depends what will happen tomorrow.
Absolutely. But it will be greater heights, greater successes. That I wish
Thank you so much.
for the time. And
Thank you, sir.
for spending
Thank you
some
for
time
thinking
talking
of
so
me
openly about your
for
work.
this opportunity.
I'm sure our listeners will benefit from it to get to know who and what is Gopi Kottoor. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.